So the ACLU about 10 years ago determined there was some really uncouth things happening with the watch list, and they tried to get into it. All their FOIA requests were denied, and they ended up filing a lawsuit against the FBI. And they gathered more than 13,000 pages of information that was denied. From that, they discovered that a huge category of non-investigative subjects was on the watch list. Again, why would you do that? Why would you claim someone's a terrorist, but you're not going to investigate them? Because they know they're not terrorists. So this is simply a way for them to track them, and it helps to justify to sheriff's office, police departments, and first responders, oh, this person's name's on the watch list. Don't treat them, don't help them.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition, liftoff.
Hello and welcome, independent researchers, skeptics, and all of humankind, to Shadow Citizen. Shadow Citizen will explore the shadows of an alternate reality. Your hosts, Rachael Mcintosh.
All right, everybody, we made it through another week. Today, I have a very interesting guest. This guest, I picked him because, you go online. I've been going online now since, I don't know, forever. And you see things about people, they've got burns on their face and it looks really tragic. And what the heck's going on with that? And you say like, oh, these people are targeted. They were targeted with, do, or these different terms they'll use. And it's like, I don't know if this is true. So today I found out, today I'm going to be talking with Richard Lighthouse. He's a board member over at this group called Targeted Justice. And somebody had told me a while ago to look into this group, but that's when I looked at the pictures. I was like, oh man, it's people with burns on their face and stuff. I was like, you got to be kidding me. They're really burning people's faces off. But then I went to Washington, D.C. I saw some bumper stickers stuck on telephone poles about it. And then I came back here to Rhode Island where I live, and a couple more instances came up. I said, you know what? I got to look into this situation. So we have Richard Lighthouse here today. He's going to tell us about targeted justice. So Richard Lighthouse, welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself, and then we'll start this whole interview.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for inviting me to your show. My name is Richard Lighthouse. I work with a group called Targeted Justice. We have a website, targetedjustice.com. Our group first started in late 2017, and we are representing and supporting targeted individuals all over the world. First question we usually get is, what is a targeted individual? A targeted individual, we've got a definition on our website under the homepage. But a targeted individual is someone who's been selected by certain government agencies, such as the CIA, the FBI, the DIA, which is the Defense Intelligence Agency. And these people are placed into a harassment program. There's basically an experiment, a very, very grisly experiment. Unfortunately, there are elements within our government, which we refer to as a deep state, that are very corrupted, unfortunately. And these groups are going to extremes to try to silence criticism of certain government programs and certain government efforts. And we've documented a lot of that on our website. There are basically three elements to the program, and I'm simplifying somewhat because it gets actually fairly complex. But there are diagrams on our homepage. I encourage folks to look those up because they're very self-explanatory. So among our more than 3,000 members are people that are harassed with what we call gang stalking. What that means is fusion centers all over the United States, and there are fusion centers in Europe and Asia as well, that are organizing and directing harassment of citizens. Many of these people are political activists. In my case, I'm a government whistleblower. That's the reason that I believe I was targeted. And sometimes random people are chosen. And unfortunately, it can be so disturbing for these people that some of them end up committing suicide. It involves isolation of the person by controlling members of the family and turning the family members against you. That's probably the most psychologically disturbing aspect.
I'm sorry to interrupt. How do they do that? How do they turn a family member against you?
So everyone in the United States, so if you look, a summary of our main message is, number one, everyone in the United States, and it appears to be most of the world, are being tracked by certain satellites. And these satellites are called GPS satellites. And they are the latest technology. All of this is done with a top secret clearance. The operations are based out of Schriever Air Force Base near Colorado Springs. It's a deep underground military base. And they have approximately 10,000 people that work at this base. It is the largest Air Force base in the world that does not have a runway, because none of the things they do operate with operating aircraft. It's all done operation of satellites. They have more than 190 satellites under their direct control. They track the precise location of every US citizen by bouncing a microwave beam right here on the top back part of your head. And if you place your hand there firmly, put your knuckles right above it, you can actually feel the microwave pulses. They're about once per second. Everyone in the United States is tracked. Every person that I have tested with my own hand, I can feel the microwave pulse. And I try to teach people to check this themselves. And that's not your heartbeat you're feeling, because there's not enough skin and blood vessels in that thin layer of your scalp to actually produce a heartbeat. So that pulse that you feel, it feels like a pulse, and then it fades, and a pulse, and then it fades. But that's actually a microwave beam that comes from a Lockheed GPS tracking satellite. And these are incredibly precise. We know from a website called GNSS, which stands for Global Navigation and Satellite Systems.
Yes.
The accuracy is better than 1 centimeter. It is extremely precise.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this technology has been used for more than 30 years. Unfortunately, the CIA funds this under what's called an unacknowledged special access program, and the US Space Force operates these satellites.
Okay, yeah.
Very, very disturbing program run by our government. There are a number of microwave weapons in orbit. We call them vercators. The patent, you can look this up, is US patent number 4345220. And it's a microwave weapon that was designed and built under an Air Force contract back in the early 1980s. The inventor is a man named Donald J. Sullivan. And he worked with the Air Force Weapons Lab under a contract to develop these weapons. These weapons produce a microwave scalar beam. In other words, this is a new type of technology that operates under a very mysterious wave. It's called a scalar wave. And Nikola Tesla actually described these in some of his early experiments 100 years ago. They remain not well understood, but the Air Force knows how to design weapons that can emit a scalar beam. And it's very much, if you want a picture, it's like a laser beam that's about 1/2 inch in diameter. And it produces a perfectly straight line. And it's called collimated. So if you take the microwave, the invisible microwaves from your microwave oven, and then focus it into a beam, that's essentially what this is doing. So it doesn't operate at the exact same frequency. That frequency varies. We've measured it repeatedly at around 3920 to 3930 megahertz.
Okay.
And the tracking frequency that they use on the top of your head is around 3600 to 3700 megahertz. So these two frequencies are very high in the spectrum. But if you can imagine, back in the early 1980s, when they first designed and launched these systems into orbit, those were very high frequencies. They're not very high frequencies now, and there's a lot of commercial equipment that can measure these. But in the early 80s, no one had equipment that could measure and surveil these types of frequencies except for government agencies. So
can I ask another question?
Sure, sure.
Now, if the government can do this to its own citizens, are they doing it to enemies? Is that why it was developed, or was it developed specifically for us? Do you know?
It is apparently part of the deep state plan to monitor, track, and surveil everyone on the planet.
Oh, okay, great.
They aren't particular just to U.S. citizens. We have found that this is a global program. About a year ago, I counted more than 60 countries that have sent us emails from individuals saying they're also being attacked in these similar methods that we've described.
How do you assess that these people are well in the head? Like I mean, obviously you know that this exists, but these people, like you said, their family members have turned against them. People are probably like, you're crazy. How do you assess that the person isn't actually crazy?
So Dr. John Hall provided an excellent reference, and he's a friend of mine. He has now retired from his medical work and still lives in San Antonio. But his best explanation when I brought up that very similar question was, we know from psychiatric and psychological testing that there's a variety of drugs that will work on people who are classified. There's lots of different classifieds. If you go to the DSM, the latest version of the DSM, there are numerous categories that they try to put these people into, but they found that you can try all these different lithium and Prozac and all these different drugs that they try on. There is not a single drug that has been found to stop the symptoms, not even one. So this is the first case of psychiatrists claiming that there's a category of people that they think are either crazy or delusional, and they use lots of labels on it. They have not found a single medicine that will stop the symptoms. That strongly suggests the symptoms are real. Okay. So
then what happens? Say, let's just use me as for an example. So I call up, first off, I get in touch with you at the website, at the targeted justice. Okay, so the person feels like they're targeted. And what's the typical targeted complaint when they contact targeted justice?
We have three main complaints, I should say, and there are lots of secondary. The first one is the gang stalking. You know, when you're being bullied at work or on the street or by your neighbors and constantly harassed and monitored. We get the horn honking. We have an individual here in Houston area who experienced harassment through a group that's called Citizen Corps, and many of them work for the fire department or the police department. And where he was living, the fire trucks, the ambulance, every time they drive in front of his house, they'd honk the horn repeatedly. So it was coordinated, it was organized, it was deliberately done by fire department, police department, ambulance, first responders. We're all told, when you drive past his house, honk the horn. And he's got it on video. Just time after time after time, they drive in loud horns right in front of his house. So it was a coordinated harassment campaign, and he's got it all on video. It's very obvious. So he's currently dealing with a court case and hoping to bring some of this out. We have examples of more than 200 court cases on our website. Unfortunately, none of those have been successful. So one of our main efforts here is to develop a class action lawsuit to raise awareness and to try to prosecute those that are responsible. So that was a segue. So there's the gang stalking, there's the directed energy weapons that I've just described, and there's another thing that's very debilitating to approximately 2/3 of the targeted individual community, and it's called voice to skull, or V2K. This is a technology that was actually developed in the early 1960s by a scientist by the name of Dr. Alan Fry, and it's called the Fry effect. And they can literally take this microwave beam and point it anywhere on your skull, and you will be the only one that will hear the voices that come through it. So you stand there and say, there's somebody cussing me out and calling me horrible names 24 hours a day. You cannot switch it off. There's no firewall for your mind. And the technology is very real. They're using the same technology on every US citizen as a subliminal message. It is broadcast from cell towers 24 hours a day. Very disturbing. And a federal judge has already ruled that subliminal messaging is illegal because it's an invasion of privacy. Yet we still have not convinced enough of the public that this is real, that everyone in the United States is technically a targeted individual. Your location is being tracked very precisely, and they're beaming messages at your head subliminally 24 hours a day. And there was a scientist by the name of Dr. Ross Adey, A-D-E-Y. You can look him up. He worked for the CIA many years ago, back in the 1950s and 1960s. There's a class action lawsuit in Canada right now that involves this man because he did horrible things to a whole class of Canadian citizens, where he did these microwave tests on them, fried their brains, and was able to program them just like you program a computer, using these techniques of subliminal messaging into the mind. You can create a secondary personality that can be switched on and off like a button. Class action lawsuit right now in Canada that's trying to address this CIA-funded doctor. And he did grisly experiments. He bragged once that he could turn anyone into a serial killer.
Oh, that's something to be proud of, I guess, right? Whoa.
Yes. So very disturbing. But no, so by 1954, we have the declassified files from 1954 from the CIA. They perfected mind control in 1954. This was before John F. Kennedy was murdered, before Robert F. Kennedy was murdered, or Martin Luther King. They had perfected the ability to mind control anyone and turn them into a killer. Very suitable for intelligence persons.
All right. Now, you said it's coming from the cell phone towers right now. Could
Yes.
this also be related to the cell phones that everybody has? I don't use a cell phone like at all, so I'm interested in this cell phone thing. Is a cell phone, does that have it? But the TV it's just from the cell phone towers?
It is primarily from the cell phone towers. They can also emit messages from satellites as well, because they're tracking you very precisely. So that same wave can act as a carrier wave to carry messages at your head 24 hours a day. It can be used to say, hey, vote for this person over and over and over.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Do you think this happens during elections? Because personally,
Yes.
this last election, in my mind, literally, I felt like I was living through psychological warfare, watching people just go, they were lost, in my opinion, lost their minds in the last election.
There are noticeable behavioral changes. So your earlier question that I don't think I answered